Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My parents abandoned me for going to university, the cruel truth about my birth and why they now seek reconciliation. Throughout my life, living with my older brother Max was a really difficult experience. Max has ADHD, which made him very hyperactive and aggressive, especially when we were children. When I was born, he was already 5 years old, and from the very beginning he showed that he was not happy with my arrival. Although it is normal for older siblings to feel jealous when a new baby arrives, Max's reaction was much more intense. He would get very angry every time my parents paid attention to me, as if my mere presence bothered him. During my childhood, Max would always take my toys without thinking twice. My birthdays, which should have been happy occasions, became total chaos because of him. He would start shouting and crying, making such a fuss that he completely ruined my celebration. Instead of feeling special on my day, I ended up feeling bad because of my brother's behavior. As I grew older, Max began to show his anger in more direct ways. He would push me out of the way even when there was enough room to pass, and sometimes he would even bite me for no reason. It was obvious that this was not a passing phase. He seemed to hold a deep grudge against me for changing the relationship we had with our parents. Max never had any friends of his own. My parents forced me to include him when my friends came to play, but it was an impossible situation because no one wanted to be around him. My friends hated him, and what should have been fun times became uncomfortable because I always had to apologize for how he behaved. As time went by, I couldn't help but feel a lot of resentment towards him. I didn't understand why he couldn't be like everyone else or control his emotions better. Besides, it was clear that he didn't like me and was always looking for fights. Living like that was very confusing and painful. I wanted a brother who would look after me, not one who made me feel bad all the time. What made everything more difficult was that my parents didn't seem to understand how the situation was affecting me. They adored Max so much that they didn't see, or didn't want to see, how his behavior hurt me. Every time I tried to explain to them how bad I felt, they ignored me. They told me that Max was special and that I had to be understanding and patient. Even though I was the youngest, they expected me to always adapt to their needs and mood swings, regardless of whether it made me unhappy. I remember especially when I turned 13. My greatest wish was to go to Disneyland with just my parents, without Max. I had long dreamed of having a special trip where, for once, I could be the center of attention without my brother ruining everything. After much insisting and negotiating, my parents agreed. The plan was for Max to stay with our grandparents for 3 days, but when Max found out, he had a terrible crisis. He cried for hours, shouting and throwing things. He even came to me shouting that he would kill me for trying to take our parents away from him. It was really terrifying to see all that anger directed at me. My parents, instead of defending me, started asking me to let Max come with us, saying it was the only way to calm him down. At first I refused, knowing that it would ruin the trip that I had wanted so much. But with Max out of control and my parents begging, I felt I had no choice but to accept. Once again, his behavior decided everything. As I feared, bringing Max turned the trip into another disaster. From the moment we arrived at Disneyland, he refused to enjoy himself like any other child. He didn't want to go on any of the rides and wouldn't leave my mother's side. He constantly complained that there were too many people and that he hated everything. His screams and cries caught everyone's attention, ruining the excitement he had been looking forward to for weeks. In just 2 hours, Max was begging us to go back to the hotel, completely ruining what should have been a magical day. In the end, my parents had to split up to handle the situation. My mother took Max back to the hotel while my father stayed with me, trying to salvage what was left of the day. Although I appreciated my father's efforts, the whole experience was ruined. Instead of the joyful celebration I had imagined, my birthday was once again marked by Max's needs and tantrums. I know that my parents did what they could with the situation they were in, but it was very clear that my brother's needs were always more important than mine. Max needed their attention all the time, and I always took a back seat. While they thought they were doing the right thing to help Max, I felt invisible, as if my needs and feelings didn't matter compared to theirs. At 17, I couldn't stand my brother's constant bullying and my parents' constant ignoring of it any longer. I started dreaming of being free, of having a life where I wasn't always in the shadow of Max's needs or what my parents expected of me. I started looking for universities far from home. When my parents found out, they got very angry. They didn't understand, or didn't want to understand, why I felt I needed to leave. They begged me to stay in our city, saying that Max needed me and that it was my responsibility to be there for him. I told them that I didn't care about Max and that I would continue to look for universities far away no matter what they thought. It was then that my parents revealed to me the real reason why they wanted me to stay. Their plan was to travel and enjoy their retirement while I took complete charge of Max. They told me that they had sacrificed their lives for years, so now it was my turn to take responsibility. First of all, they had never consulted me about this plan, nor had I given them any reason to think that I would want to take care of my brother. Secondly, I had no intention of becoming his carer. I wasn't his father, and it seemed unfair to me that they expected that of me. I told them very clearly. I suggested that they could enjoy their retirement and travel without Max if they made other arrangements, such as hiring someone to look after him or teaching him to be more independent, at least for a few days. My mother said that Max would never feel comfortable with a carer and insisted that he needed 24-hour supervision, something that only a family member could provide, that is, me. My father agreed and even called me selfish for not accepting their plan. His words hurt me a lot, and to make matters worse, my father revealed that the reason they had me, their second child, was so that when I grew up I could take care of Max. I was frozen. My mind couldn't process what I had just heard. I looked at them in disbelief. My mother quickly scolded my father for revealing that secret and asked him to apologize. Then she tried to make it up to him by saying that it wasn't true and that of course they loved me, but her words sounded false. The damage was already done. I couldn't ignore what she had said, and I finally understood why I had always felt invisible compared to my brother. Discovering that my existence had been planned as a solution to take care of Max, instead of as a person with my own dreams and plans, was devastating. My mother kept insisting that Max needed help and that, as part of the family, I had an obligation to him. She even said that going away to university wouldn't improve my life, and that staying at home was better because it would save me rent. I understood that Max had a condition, but did that mean I didn't have the right to my own life? Did I have to give up my future just because he existed? It was a suffocating thought. I didn't tell them much at the time, knowing it wouldn't help to try to change their way of thinking. But inside I was more determined than ever to leave. I ignored their pleas and concentrated on my university applications, more determined than ever to get away from them. It wasn't easy, but I worked really hard and in the end I succeeded. I got into a university good enough to make it worth the effort. As expected, when I broke the news to my parents, they were extremely angry. They flatly refused to let me go and tried everything to make me feel guilty and make me stay. Although I was already 18, I knew I needed help to get away from my parents, so I called my grandparents asking for their support. My grandmother, who had always been affectionate towards me, came straight away, helped me pack my things and documents, and offered me to stay with her and my grandfather until it was time for me to go to university. But my parents didn't stop there. They threatened to withhold any financial support, saying that if I left, I would be alone forever and that they would cut all contact with me. But I didn't give up even then. I took out a student loan to pay for my studies. In addition, my grandfather offered to help me with part of the expenses using his retirement savings. It hurt a lot to accept his help, knowing how hard he and my grandmother had worked for that money. They were doing what my parents should have done, giving me love, support and financial help. The next 4 years were a lot of work and effort. University was difficult, not only because of the studies but also emotionally. While most of my classmates had parents who supported them and enough money to go out and have fun, I did not have that privilege. I spent almost all my time studying as hard as I could. To support myself, I also worked part-time as a waiter, juggling long shifts with nights of studying. They weren't easy years, but I kept going because I knew I had no other choice. During all that time, my parents never contacted me, not once, to see how I was or if I needed anything. Their silence hurt a lot. Sometimes I doubted my worth, wondering if I really deserved to be abandoned like that by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But even then, I refused to give up and promised myself that if I kept going, I would eventually build a life for myself. After graduating, I was incredibly lucky to get an excellent job. It was the opportunity I had worked so hard for. It felt like the first real reward for all the sacrifices I had made. With this job, I was finally able to start paying off my student loans. And most importantly, I started paying back the money my grandfather had given me to help me when my parents wouldn't. He never expected me to pay him back. It was a gift of love, not a loan, but it was very important to me to lighten his burden and show him that his trust in me had not been in vain. I continued to maintain a close and loving relationship with my grandparents. Whenever I can, I buy tickets for them to come and visit me, making sure they know how much I appreciate everything they have done for me. This year, my grandparents started to tell me worrying things about my brother. It seems that Max's behavior has worsened over the years, and as I was no longer there to be his target, he had started to bother other people. This year, he began to harass the children in the neighborhood. He would throw water at them when they played outside and try to scare them by shouting at them that they couldn't play in that area. As expected, the children's parents were very concerned and complained several times to my parents, asking them to control Max's behavior and keep him away from their children. But as always, my parents did nothing effective. They thought Max would eventually get bored and leave them alone, but Max continued to bother the children. The situation reached breaking point when one of the parents, tired of the constant harassment, called the police. When they arrived, they saw Max throwing water at a girl and shouting at her to run for her life. He was immediately arrested for child molestation. My parents protested, but the police also scolded them for not controlling Max. Although this news surprised some in the family, it didn't surprise me at all. I had seen his out-of-control behavior for years, knowing full well that my parents preferred to make excuses for him rather than hold him accountable. Even so, knowing that my brother was in trouble with the law was a stark reminder of how concerning his behavior had become. My parents posted his bail, but now Max has to appear before a judge. This week I got a big surprise when I got a call from my parents. After 6 years without any contact, it felt very strange to see their number on my phone screen. My father explained to me that both he and my mother were having a lot of trouble dealing with the situation with my brother. He told me that they wanted to make peace with me, that they had missed me all these years but that they had been too angry and stubborn about my decision to go to university to contact me. It was as if he were trying to change history, ignoring all those years of pain and abandonment with an apology that didn't sound very sincere. I could already sense that they were calling because they needed something, so I asked them to be direct and tell me what they wanted. It was then that my father began to explain that, with my brother's case pending in court, they were finally beginning to see that maybe I had been right about him all along. My father admitted, although it took him a lot of effort to do so, that my brother really was a stalker. He told me that his behavior had gotten much worse since I left and that he had been getting into more and more trouble. Dad told me that he and Mom had been talking and now they felt bad about everything that had happened, and they acknowledged that they should have listened to me more. He told me that they were finally willing to take Max to therapy so that he could get the help he obviously needed. Hearing these words from him felt almost unreal, especially because I had spent a large part of my childhood begging him and my mom to do something about my brother's behavior, only to be ignored or told that I had to understand him. My father continued talking and told me that they wanted to meet with me in person to apologize, if I was willing to listen to them. It was then that I told him, trying to remain calm, that although I was glad that my brother was finally getting the help he needed, the truth was that it didn't matter to me anymore. Too much time had passed without them bothering to contact me and, over the years, I had learned to live without them and had built a life that no longer included them. I wasn't interested in reconciling with them now. My father insisted, trying to convince me to think about it. Am I the bad guy if I don't want to make peace with my family, especially after the way they have treated me all these years? Update 1. I want to clarify a few things as I can't reply to all the comments. Many ask if my brother was bullied, but the answer is no. He went to a very good school where the teachers looked after him very much and my parents were always aware of how he was doing. There is no way he could have been bullied at school and that is why he took it out on me. The truth is that his problems came from how they let him behave at home. He was mean to me and my parents never did anything about it. If he bit me or hit me, there was no punishment. Meanwhile, they always expected me to calm him down or be more understanding of his way of being. As to why Max never went to therapy, the truth is simple, it was too expensive for my parents. What's more, my mother has always been very possessive of Max. She never let him spend much time with anyone but her because she believed that only she understood what he needed. That's why Max depends too much on my mother and she is the one who makes all the decisions for him. After reading all the comments on my post, I now understand why my parents are contacting me after all this time. It's obvious. They probably need my help with my brother's legal case. Maybe they want me to speak well of him if necessary, or maybe they expect me to help with the lawyer's fees, since I earn well and they may know it. I know that after so many years it can't be just because they want to reconnect. It seems more like they are desperate to fix things, especially with Max's legal problems. They need someone to support him and I think they think I can be that person. I'm sure they want me to be the good daughter who will help them solve their problems. But I'm not going to do it. Update 2. Many people ask what my grandparents think about my parents wanting to reconnect with me. The truth is that they are not very happy with the idea. Over the years they have hardly spoken to my parents, especially after everything that happened when I was thrown out for wanting to go to university. Since then, their relationship has been strained and they generally keep their distance. The only reason my grandparents have any contact with my parents is because they sometimes have to help out with Max. Whether it's looking after him or taking over when my parents need help, my grandparents know exactly what Max is like. They've seen it firsthand, his bullying, his behavior, and they're disappointed in how my parents have handled everything for years. They have always supported me, but when it comes to Max, they have never ignored or justified his actions. Now that my parents want to make things right with me, my grandparents have made it clear to me that they understand why I'm hesitant. They have advised me to be careful. They know how much my parents have hurt me and they don't want me to rush into something that could end up hurting me more. What's more, my parents have continued to send me messages this week. They are insistently asking me to give them another chance. They keep saying how sorry they are for how things have been between us and that they have realized their mistakes. To be honest, I feel confused. Update 3. My suspicions about my parents were correct. Today I finally agreed to have a video call with them after they had been asking me to do so for weeks. It had been a long time since we had last seen each other, and I had many mixed emotions before the call. When I saw them on the screen, I noticed how different they looked. They seemed much older than I remembered, as if they were very tired. It hurt a little to see them like that. Despite all the emotions I felt, I tried to keep calm. We talked about their lives, how they had been, and I told them a little about my work. We talked about my grandparents, catching up on the little things that had happened in our family. The conversation felt almost normal, as if it hadn't been that long since I last saw them. My parents apologized to me again. They seemed almost desperate as they spoke. They asked me to come and visit them, saying that they had been thinking about me, but at that moment I couldn't hold back any longer. I asked them directly, why now? After all, if they had really missed me, wouldn't they have contacted me before? During university, when I was far away and really needed their support, they made no effort to keep in touch. So what was different now? Why did they suddenly feel so keen to reconnect after all this time? It was then that my parents, almost without meaning to, revealed the real reason why they had contacted me. They explained that they urgently needed financial help to look after Max. My father told me that over the years they had spent almost all their savings on Max's medical treatment. The expenses had left them penniless. And now, with his legal case pending and the therapy he would need for his behavioral problems, they couldn't afford all the expenses. My father asked me, almost begging, if I could send them some money every month, since I was doing so well in life. My mother quickly added that the money would only be for Max, nothing else. I shook my head, saying no, feeling a knot in my stomach. I asked them, my voice trembling with frustration, do you really think I'm going to give you my hard-earned money to spend on Max? I was trying to control my anger. No matter how much you need it, how could I help you with him? He was the one who harassed me all those years. He made my life impossible. He ruined every single one of my birthdays. My voice broke as I continued to speak. He never showed any compassion or love for me. So why would I help him now? Everything that had happened with Max hurt so much. And now they wanted me to be the one to save them financially, by helping someone who had treated me so badly. It didn't make sense. And I couldn't forget so many years of pain, but I didn't stop there. All my frustration and the resentment I had kept inside for years came to the surface. I told my parents that they had never protected me from Max. They never showed me any real compassion when it came to him. Instead, they just expected me to play their game and look after him, as if everything he did was something I simply had to accept. I was a child and I needed to be protected. But they failed me many times. I told them that even though Max has ADHD, that doesn't mean he shouldn't be responsible for his actions. Now that he is an adult, I blamed my parents and made it clear that if they had really gotten him the help he needed when he was younger, maybe things would be different today. Perhaps he would have become a better person, someone capable of understanding the damage he sometimes does to others, but they didn't. They let him get away with it so many times that he ended up being arrested for harassing young children. And even after that, they were asking me to help him as if I hadn't been his first victim. My parents tried to argue, but I told them that although I appreciated their apology, it didn't mean that I was going to forgive and forget everything that had happened. Hearing this, my parents backed down. They told me that, regardless of whether I could help them with money or not, they still wanted to work on our relationship. Mom told me that she wished she and Dad had made different decisions in the past, but since they couldn't change what had already happened, they wanted to be there for me in any way they could from now on. On the one hand, I appreciated that they wanted to move on, but on the other hand, I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of all the pain that had been there for so long. I asked them for time to think about it. Update 4. Sorry for not updating sooner, it's been a month since the last time. The judge ordered that my brother has to go to therapy, which I guess is a step forward. My parents also had to pay a large fine for what Max did to the neighborhood kids. To be honest, I thought my brother would get a harsher punishment, but it seems that the judge was more understanding because it was the first time that Max had had any trouble with the law. What's more, Some of the parents of the children affected got a restraining order against my brother. Now Max is legally forbidden to go anywhere near their children. If he breaks this order, he will be arrested. As for my parents, since I refused to give them financial help, they haven't mentioned the subject again. We still talk, but only about small, unimportant things. I guess they really meant what they said and are just trying to fix their relationship with me. Although I'm glad to be somewhat present in their lives again, I'm not ready to have a close relationship with my family, especially not with Max. I don't think I'll ever forgive him, no matter how much time passes. The things he did to me, bullying me and making my life miserable for so many years, are things that can't just be forgotten. I hope that with therapy he will finally start to take responsibility for his actions. I really don't know how long that will take, or if it will ever happen.